Hey everyone, Eric Bean, CEO of Happy. This is not a technical per se. There is going to be some technology piece on how it impacts crypto, etc. But we're going to talk today about what happened with OPEC and why you need to be very aware of what this is because it will affect everybody. So OPEC and the Saudis announced huge cuts in production, which means oil prices skyrocketed immediately. Now, the United States was getting ready to potentially buy and replace our oil reserves, which we've sold over to China. And now we can't do it because we would lose a ton of money from where we bought the original oil versus where we'd replenish it. But that's not the major issue. Yes, energy costs will rise dramatically, but here's where it becomes real squirrely. Because oil is tied to inflation, and because we've been raising rates dramatically to try to impact inflation and slow inflation, we are now in a position where inflation is going to skyrocket. And the Fed has already said, look, we're going to keep raising rates to try to fight inflation. Now, at the same time the Fed's been raising rates, that's also causing bank collapses all over the United States. We've seen the second and third largest banks fail in the US, as well as the number 21 bank in the world fail over with Credit Suisse. Deutsche Bank is in trouble. Worldwide banks are struggling. Why? Because they had a ton of cash. They bought T-bills and bonds. The mark-to-market accountant showed losses on those when the rates went up dramatically. The United States Treasury said, oh, we're not going to print this. This is going to impact the U.S. Taxpayer. But what they did is they actually covered the mark-to-market losses on the banks, eliminated fractional banking, which basically is the ratio of capital to lending. And this is a little nerdy. You can, just stay with me. I'm not going to go full nerd the whole time. But, fractional banking is you have $30,000, you can lend out $1 million. It's 3% your minimum. So with a banking now, they don't even have fractional anymore. So they can lend out with no ratios. And their losses are now covered by the Fed, who added $300 billion to their balance sheet after cutting $600 billion over the last year and a half while doing rate raises. So now, where are we? Because inflation will now go up, the Fed is in a position where they will have to continue to raise rates aggressively if they're going to be serious about inflation, which I don't believe they ever were. This will cause a massive bank crash and basically a collapse of the U.S. economy to a large degree. You'll see recession, you'll see layoffs, you'll see house values come down, you'll see car values come down, you'll see high unemployment. That's just the standard economic impact of high aggressive rate Fed rate increases. And you're going to see it now because there's a bunch of bubbles and so on and so forth. On the flip side, there's the geopolitical piece where OPEC doing this is really a slap to the U.S. The U.S. used to have all the power on the oil side. Now we have none. Saudis have it. Saudis have now aligned with China and India and Asia and away from the United States and basically gave the United States the finger with OPEC in doing this move. Russia's also part of the cut, which means Russia is now going to be making more money per barrel, which means that basically OPEC and the Saudis have sided with Russia against Ukraine and against the United States and against NATO to fund Russia, by Russia being able to make more money per barrel and thereby fund the actual war. So this is exceptionally bad because the Saudis have tied the United States to the petrodollar. So the entire value of the United States is based on the fact that all oil was being settled in the US dollar. That's not happening anymore. Now you have India, Russia, Brazil, China, Russia. I already said Russia. You have a lot of different places that are now saying, we're not going to do that anymore. Mexico is now looking at settling off the US dollar. So the United States has basically in the last year, ever since taking Russia off SWIFT, basically settled the fact that we're not going to be the world reserve anymore and will send the United States into a very weird, precarious economic position. So for those of you that are out there, we're heading towards bank collapses if the Fed continues to raise rates. If they don't, you're going to have massive jumps in gas prices, unless the U.S. obviously steps up their production in a massive way, which we haven't been doing. And then alongside of that, if the Fed says, hey, we're going to pause or not, you still get those spikes. You're still going to have the inflation. The banks could have a chance to recover, less collapses, et cetera, but you're going to have more Fed money printing, um, which means more inflation. So inflation on top of inflation can start to really compound inflation. We're going to have to raise the debt limit in order to pay because the rates are high. We can't make the payments. We're at 98% GDP to income. So the United States dollar is in deep shit as we're also trying to pay our debt, which we can't. So it's a compounding issue. And the world knows it, which is why everyone had stopped buying treasuries and bonds, except for our banks, which end up now holding this horrible bag of crap. And, at the end of the day, crypto Bitcoin may get pummeled originally, which it did when this news broke, because the odds of the Fed rate hike go up. As the Fed rate hike goes up, the dollar strengthens against other currencies. Now, the news runs that out like it's an awesome thing. Hey, the dollar strengthened against other currencies. No, that's not a good thing. It's good if you're overseas and you're traveling. It's good if you're buying property overseas. It's not good if you're exporting, which is a huge part of what the U.S. does. So when the U.S. exports somewhere else, people have to pay in the U.S. dollar and their currencies are way weaker. They don't want to go with the U.S. dollar. They'd prefer to go with something that's a currency where their currency is equal to or more powerful than the other currencies. So it ruins our trade as the dollar strengthens in accordance or in comparison to other currencies. So as we raise rates, the dollar strengthens and inflation continues. So the dollar actually weakens in terms of what we can buy here, while strengthening against what we can buy against other currencies internationally. So a little bit of an inverse relationship there. But for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, they tend to go down when the dollar strengthens. So when the dollar weakens, you see Bitcoin spike. So once the Fed pauses and or cuts, you're going to see Bitcoin spike further. The reason Bitcoin has spiked so far this year is everyone, knows the Fed's full of shit and they're going to have to cut and pause. They're bluffing 100%. They can't continue this path without destroying everything. And the economic news that they've been running off of is pretty much fake. The jobs report today was terrible. So they're going to have to, at some point, pause or cut. This puts pressure on the Fed. And obviously the Saudis and OPEC knew that this would put pressure on the Fed to keep doing the things that will actually crash the U.S. economy and keep doing things to put pressure on the United States and the U.S. dollar. So it's pretty scary times if you're the U.S. I can't believe we're actually here, and I can't believe how quickly it happened. But we are here. It has happened. Best bet is definitely Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, I believe, will, especially decentralized ones, are going to do very, very well. Which is probably why the U.S. government's been working diligently to try to do banning. Elizabeth Warren's talking about her anti-crypto move because she can't extort crypto people and make money on the extortion side. Not that she extorts anybody, but she does. She would never do that, but she has. And she does it with banks. She can't do that with Bitcoin. So she's out with this big, hey, I'm against. There's no inherent value there. There's nothing backing it. And everybody in the crypto community goes, yeah, well, look what's backing the fiat. Nothing right now. It used to be faith and belief, and now there isn't even that. So be careful with your bank. You're not going to be covered by FDIC. Their ratio of what they have versus what they can cover is about 1,600 to 1, meaning in total deposits, there's about $1,600 for every $1 that they actually can cover. So don't expect any real help there. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, and frankly, anything from the BRICS group, Russian ruble, Chinese yen, not India. India's currency, until it stabilizes, is not very good. But really, right now, the most stable currency in the entire world is the Russian ruble, ironically. So it's partially backed by gold. And I think the BRICS currency that they're going with eventually will be partially backed by gold, a lot by minerals and some other actual things. So they're going to have a consortium of things that will back the dollar that will actually replace and or compete against the U.S. dollar. Right now, according to current charts, if everything keeps the same way, it surpasses the US dollar in 2030. However, with the way it's accelerating, it looks like it'll be 2025. So that's not good. So I wanted everyone to at least be aware of this just in a large sort of way. This is not a conspiracy theory. These things are really happening. And it's going to take a lot of people by surprise. So watch what the Fed does next time around. If they raise rates, look for that bank collapse. And it's already going to be happening. The bank dominoes will start falling. Just be aware of it and understand what that means. Have a backup plan. For those of you that do, by the way, that are working with crypto, keep your eye on Bitcoin, gold. Try to diversify. Make sure your family's safe because things are getting pretty weird. Ever since we went into this full war with Ukraine, which was always a terrible idea, things have gotten bad for us. Shocking. And with Russia, they're actually getting better, which is also shocking. So, we'll see what happens, but that's my take. Take it for what it's worth, and everybody be safe. Bye-bye.